All right. My name is Dr. Sharnael Wolverton C. Holland. I am with Spitfire International, and I am super excited and very full of gratitude and love for this woman who we have here today, Mary Rodwell. I was first introduced to her by a friend a couple years ago and got both of her books, which I'm embarrassed to say that I have not read them both fully yet, but I will be talking about these today, and she will be too. The New Human is one of them, and Awakening, and she'll talk about any other resources that she has as well, including her documentary. And then through the course of meeting new people and looking for my own integrity, wholeness, healing, my journey, her name just kept coming up and up and up and up and up as someone that would be a good piece of the puzzle for me in order to just get some answers that I was looking for. So I reached out to her for some help and guidance, and also was like, hey, since we're all getting healed and whole and getting that integration back, like, let's just do this all together. Why don't we just do this? And she was happy to offer her time to be with us today. So very, very thankful for her coming all the way from Australia to be with us today. And thank you so much, Mary, for being here.
Sharnael, it's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for doing what you're doing, because without you putting these events on, that you're interviewing people who've got amazing information and understanding that is helping so many. You know, I can't do this without, you know, the help of, you know, individuals that are putting their time and energy in the way that you are. So thank you as well for putting this on.
Awesome. So to start, because I know there's some people who are just like, who is this lady? Do tell us more. I would love for you to fill us in on a little bit of your background, of what you did before, what you're doing now, and, you know, how you even got there. If you don't mind giving us a little bit of your bio and kind of your journey.
Thank you. To start with, I was a state registered nurse in England for a number of years, and then I trained as a midwife. So I got a lovely balance in terms of what I loved the most about being a midwife was looking after the little tiny prem babies, because I worked on the special care unit. So the beginning of life, and in nursing you often saw the end of life. So it was a very interesting combination. I'm very grateful for my background in that, because it gave me a real understanding of health and understanding what medicine had to offer. But this was 40 years ago now. What was fascinating for me, that after I did that, I became a mom, and I had three adult children. But I also got invited to learn about counseling. And I had no idea what counseling was. It was still very new when I came into it. But what I saw as I worked in a medical practice was that how much stress and how much emotions and psychology was part of illness. And that was a revelation for me, because I looked and liked the idea of prevention rather than cure as a way of helping people. So working in that field, I got everything, grief and bereavement, the whole, you know, family issues and whatever. When I came to Australia, I decided to focus still on counseling rather than go back to nursing, because I ended up training in grief and bereavement hospice. And again, people facing their mortality and asking me, what do you believe happens when I die? Because they might know they've only got a few weeks to live. People were also having expanded experiences in that emotional time where, you know, they were trying to work things out in a way that we're trying to do today with what's happening on the planet. Why am I here? What's it all about? What matters to me? Were all the big questions. And also some were seeing, you know, feeling mum was around, even though mum had just passed on, or they were getting a lot of experiences out of the box. And for me, being brought up in a conventional religion, I did believe that we survived physical life, but I realized that the religion that I had was very limited, because there were certain things not allowed within that religion, such as reincarnation, etc., etc. And I was reading, because I've been one of these people that if it's weird and wonderful, I've got a book on it, because I'm inclined. I want to understand, and I've always been fascinated by the unusual, the mysteries, trying to understand why we're here, what's it all about, the big question. Even as a child, I wanted to understand how it all worked. And I did feel that living one life really didn't seem very fair, because you just get a handle on how it all works and then you die. And that didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me somehow. But there were two significant things that brought me into this, from accepting that reincarnation was more likely real, because I learned, I did a course on clinical hypnotherapy, which didn't take in past lives. It took in stop smoking and etc., but it didn't take in past lives and expanded reality. That was something that I explored on my own with others. And I found more and more that it wasn't about a belief. When you take somebody into that space and you're getting them to explore another life, they will do that spontaneously if there is an openness there. And they would come back with information about that life and understanding that often was very relevant to this one. So when I'd done enough of that and experienced it myself, I had no doubts that we were eternal, that we literally have many lifetimes, but not necessarily all as, you know, physical in human form on planet Earth. That became even more obvious when I read two books. One of them was Dr. John Mack, Harvard professor of psychiatry, who sadly has passed on, wrote two books. One of them, Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens, and the other one was Passport to the Cosmos, where he did a lot of regression work and realized, coming from a skeptic, realizing that this was very real for those that experienced it. I happened to read that, plus one by Whitley Strieber called Communion, which was his own experiences. He's written many books since, and he's very well known. And between the two of them, one was the psychiatrist, the other one was the experiencer. Reading those books, literally within a few weeks, my very first client came to me and said, Mary, I've heard you're open-minded. For this, there's no support groups. For this, they just think you're a loony. And he proceeded to say, I wake up with marks on my body. I know I go up on spacecraft. My partner's having experiences. My children are having experiences. The relatives won't come to the house because they think it's demons. Can you help? Wow. And that was the catalyst for me, because all of a sudden, the books that I'm reading are very relevant to this gentleman that walks through the door. And he's actually become a really good friend now. He's an author of 4 books himself, and he lives in England, but he was in Western Australia then. But what made it even more poignant, really, was 2 weeks later, another lady walks through the door and says, I have these beings around me. Can you help? Because I don't know what to do. So within the space of 2 weeks, I have 2 people walking through the door. I then meet a social worker that tells me that she was thinking she was going crazy because she saw 3 beings in a lounge room and thought, oh, I'm crazy. Her friend knocks on the door and comes to see her and says, do you realize you've got 3 beings in your lounge room? And she said, you can see them as well? And the person said, yes, I can see them. So I connected with her. And to cut a very long story short, it was very clear very quickly that something was happening here that was very real to certain people. And I needed to find out more about it, because if I'm going to be a support with someone's experience, no matter how they experience life, it is valid for them. Even if it's not my own experience, doesn't make it invalid. It just means I don't know enough about it, or I haven't experienced it. So for me, okay, so what can I do to help? And the bottom line was, there was no one out there that most of them could go to, because you go to a clinical psychologist, you go to a psychiatrist. We know the model they're going from, and the model doesn't allow you to be multidimensional, doesn't allow you to see things, even if you are seeing them, like orbs of light, energy fields, like, you know, beings and angels or fairies, whatever it is that you're seeing, doesn't allow you to do that unless you, that they're allowed to label you as in some way mentally ill. And this, for me, after taking people into past lives, after seeing literally how many people started to come to me, and I've worked with over 3,500 families and children now. And this is global. This is, I get emails from Brazil, you know, Argentina, to Africa, to Russia, to Poland. And they're all telling me similar things about their experience. And Sharnael, you were saying, you know, this whole thing about not being able to talk about this because either family or partners or extended family or friends really struggle as soon as you start challenging their paradigm, challenging their belief system, because it's scary to think maybe there's more, and not everyone wants to go there. So you live in this world of, I can't even talk about it, so I don't even know whether it's real, but I know something is affecting me on some level. And that was why I wrote the book Awakening, because where do you go? Who do you talk to? How do you find ways to understand what's going on? And for me, it was like, I need to write down all the questions people ask me, like, how do I know it's real? How do I know I'm not crazy? Who can I talk to support me? What do I do about the fear? What do I do about the fact that I'm seeing beings and understanding that I'm getting information and I don't know where I'm getting it from? How do I deal with that multidimensional feeling and awareness? You know, when I wake up and I find that I'm wondering whether I've got an implant or I've got this, what do I do about that? So all the questions went into Awakening. And the fascinating thing was that the more people understood and the more they integrated that and normalized it, in fact, the more healthy psychologically and emotionally they were. So it literally transformed their life. And that was why I wrote Awakening.
Wow. Well, so many things are coming to my mind. I even took notes because I was like, okay, I got to say something about that. I got to ask about that. But a couple things. First of all, you had mentioned something about reincarnation. And I also come from a Christian background, 2 decades of ministry, but I'm also a freaking science geek, naturopathic doctor, always been studying neuroscience, chemistry, brain physiological, anatomy and chemistry and brain chemistry, and just your physiology and how everything affects the biofield, and you only get what you are. And I've written books, mass books, 5 books on all these subjects. And I've had different people talk about past lives or what have you, and I don't know where I am on that yet. It's 100%. I'm not, but where I can land on it and have agreed to, at least so far, is that, there is genetic memory, and we all came from source. So if if I have the same genetics in my body, and my cells on a cellular level that have been carried and recycled however many times, we know that if there is even a modern day situation where people get a lung or a kidney from another donor, that there's actual cellular memory in the liver, in the part of the liver or the lung or the kidney, where someone maybe all of a sudden has a craving for French fries and wants to listen to the Beatles 24 hours a day when they never did before they got that kidney. And because once they got the cellular memory of that organ put in, there's a connection there. So it makes sense to me, on as far as my brain and where I'm at anyway, is that we could have sudden memories of things that are attached to our genetics and our ancestors. But then again, we're all one. And, I've had this this, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, decree, this voice, this thing within my head over the last few days, especially because what's going on is one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And when I think of indivisible, it means not able to be separate, as one. When I think of one nation, my past program would be United States of America. Now I'm thinking one nation as in galaxies of people all in one source, all connected to source as one, in union, God within and God without, not meaning without, but meaning as one. And that's why I have a book called The Frequency, The Science of Miracles, and it's called Remembering the Frequency of Love. Love meaning God, love meaning source. Remembering as in literal, remembering, meaning as one, becoming one again. And that word integrity, I love integrity because it means to be integrated, mind, body, and spirit. But integration isn't just within this body, it's with the earth and the Schumann and the field. And also there's this whole other realm now. And when you were talking about like not wanting to talk about it and, being fearful, luckily for me, in some ways, if you want to say luckily, because of my background in ministry, when these experiences were happening to me, I wasn't seeing grays. I did see one like a few weeks ago for the first time, and that's another story. But before that, I've only seen these ginormous, gorgeous beings of light that were very loving, that made me cry, that I could feel and still feel, that said these profound things in their mind that I could feel through my entire body with their words, or their thoughts, I should say, that changed my life, that brought healing to me, that gave me direction. And my filter or box for that at the time was angels, and so I was like, oh my God, I had another encounter. And because of my platform, I was able to say, well, an angel came last night and told me this, and everyone would be like, okay. And there was no questions and no whatever. I have had like missing time where I thought, well, I guess I'm just transported to heaven and these things happened. And, well, now that I'm getting some more, I guess, pieces to the puzzle, I'm realizing angel by definition just means messenger. So yes, messengers. And also that maybe some of this isn't like the way that I thought it was, and that I'm having to kind of reconstruct like what I thought was programming is, or what I thought was real, is that reality has just been like smashed. And I'm like, whoa. And it was, it's been about a 3-4 year wake up for me to just be like, everything I thought was real is like, it's not what I thought. And I may go through 10 more of those. I don't know, maybe even on the reincarnation thing, or maybe whatever the subject it is. What I have figured out is the more that I think I know, the more I absolutely know nothing of. And that's why I'm meeting people like you. But what do you say about the genetic memory thing? Like, does that resonate, or am I just like, is that like, tell me? I mean, I don't agree or not. I mean, I don't, whatever you believe, I'm okay with. I would like to know. Yeah.
I think, Sharnael, you're absolutely right in terms of there is genetic memory, and I've got no doubts that we have that, because we still don't really understand DNA. And but I feel it's not just genetic memory. When I go to the DNA, the reason it interests me is we went from Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal, have a missing link, then all of a sudden, out of the blue, Homo sapiens sapiens appears with twice the brain size, 223 genes that are added to our genetic makeup, out of the blue, just sideways insertion, all to do with higher psychological functioning. And you have to say to yourself, now, how did that happen? And so we get to who are our ancestors. what was it that happened? And Dr. Francis Crick, I quote a lot in my books, he was a co-founder of the DNA molecule. And he said that he believed that we were intelligently designed. And he talks about they put something into our DNA that at some point we would have the awareness of who we are. And I think there's two things with that when we reached a certain level of understanding or of knowledge, and I mention this a lot, that there are two things that we have discovered. One of them is that we have information. The geneticists that have been whistleblowers have said they've seen evidence that we've been spliced and there's been things added to our genome. And the other thing is that there's dormant DNA that the scientists still don't really understand. And the sense is, what is that dormant DNA? What is it that's held in that DNA? And there are many of those that are waking up, that are working with frequency and working with healing, that are talking about activating that dormant DNA. And as they do so, then these individuals start to feel and sense and know their connections to the ancestors, which are from the stars. So all the gods of old, if you look at that in a modern framework, the gods of old were most likely, and I certainly believe that now, are extraterrestrials that have come to this planet and have altered our DNA and added DNA of theirs to our genome, our genes. And the bottom line is with that we saw them as gods in the past. You know, there were many indigenous tribes talk about the gods coming down from heaven and interfering or adding to our DNA. So there you have it, encapsulated it, that we are part of them genetically. So we have it in a very physical way. And when people say, oh, I feel I'm from the Pleiades, or I feel I'm from Arcturus, why would they say that? Unless there was something in their knowing that connects them to those planets. And I believe it's more than fantasy, it's more than imagination, it is a deep knowing they're connected. And many of them get visited by the family. And that is what we're experiencing when we interact with contact or encounters with our non-human ancestors. And to give you a quote that's in the New Human of an 8-year-old that told me his family were the mantis beings, that when he dies, he's going back to being a mantis, which is one of these mantis looking like beings and what have you. And he even described that when he was on board craft, sometimes his essence evaporated, his soul, into the mantis form for a time on board craft. And then when he needed to come back to being human again, this essence would come back into his human form to come back down to earth. So we've really got to expand our understanding of ourselves, how eternal we are, and our connection to the family or the ancestors, the star family that everybody who is waking up is starting to experience and understand. But the genetics are there. What's happening is that dormant DNA is being activated. More and more information is being made available to us. And I'll tell you, one of the science facts is 1 gram of DNA can hold everything that's on the internet right now. It has that capacity of storage. So just think what's actually in our dormant DNA that's being activated and why we talk about people waking up. This is part of it. It's the activation of DNA and our connection to the family, which we have on multiple levels because we're in a hologram. We're in a quantum reality and everything is connected. And that's what they often talk about. The Akashic records, I believe, is an access to that once we open up to it.
Well, the parallels of everything that you're saying, the synchronicities, as a scientist, again, you're talking about this, dead DNA or hidden, whatever DNA I had referred to as junk DNA. I've heard some people talk about. So supposedly, we use 3 to 5% of our brain, right? Supposedly we only activate it and 3 to 5% of our quote DNA genetics. And then there's also supposedly only 5% of what's been discovered in the universe. And you're talking about, again, as above, so below. And you probably heard that saying, my spiritual father, this guy, Bob Jones, he would say that all the time. And to the point where one day, even a couple of weeks ago, I was thinking about all of those things being, you said, the more we wake up, the more we're connected. Well, the more we're waking up, the more our cells are waking up, the more our brain is waking up, the more discovery we're seeing, because it all is so connected. And I literally was like, thinking about what Bob would always tell us before he passed on. And I looked it up because I was like, I know that's not a scripture. I was trying to figure out, where did that come from? And he would say that all the time, because he'd always say, as above, so below, as above, so below. Well, I look it up and it's in the Emerald Tablets. And, it's also in scripture in another way. It says, on earth as it is in heaven. And I was just like, oh my gosh, he probably knew that he was quoting the Emerald Tablets. And, that's one thing about the Bible, is there's so many things cited that are in the Bible that they're not cited, which is against all literature, rules. It's like, I love the Bible and I believe in the Bible, although I believe there's a lot of things that aren't cited and there's missing things. And there's a lot of power and frequency to what's written there. And also, why aren't some of these things cited? Because they're from other books. And, so that's been, a jump for me and my programming too, is just like looking through outside, in some of these other books to go, okay, what else is there? And giving myself permission to have the courage and the boldness to not just search for truth that reaffirms what I've already been told or thought or found, but to actually have the courage to go outside of anything I would ever think is true, to think, well, maybe there's something actually beyond what I even know. And how cool would that be if I could learn something or remember something else? And I started reading Dr. John's book. I'm about halfway through. It's a big book. And I picked it up maybe a week ago, and the first day I read almost the whole thing. Like, it was just like I was sucked in. And when you mentioned that all these people just suddenly came to you when you started studying this, and I've always said, what you focus on, you make room for. And the more I looked into these things myself, I had 3 phone calls in one morning where people were just suddenly coming to me going, okay, I know this is crazy. Please don't judge me. Please, dear God, I've known you for a decade or however long, but do you know anything about this? Leaving your body, floating out of the room, lights outside the window, blue orbs doing, whatever. And it was like, okay. So I pick up the phone. I call them. Okay, so let me just be honest with you, because I figure that if they're coming to me, then that is a sign that this is a person that I can share with. And I literally just told them, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to straight shoot here. And I told them some things, and within a half an hour, they're bawling, crying. I'm bawling, crying. And an hour later, another call, same, another call, same. When I got off, I was a little tired from crying, but also felt more relief in my body than I had ever felt up to that point. And I was just like, wow, I feel so much energy, because I realized that this had been like trapped and not talked about and not shared. And I also got this thing, probably like what you were saying, is like, there's a lot of people out there going through this stuff that I have even personally known who hasn't told me about it. And now they're telling me, and I'm telling them. And now that I went and talked about this in the last few weeks out loud, I have gotten hundreds of texts and calls and emails and Facebook messages of going, me too. Oh my gosh, what about this? And blah, blah, blah. And I am not even, I know there's someone very dear to me that came out in 2009 that still doesn't want to talk publicly. And he didn't have the best time when he came, was honest about it, being in full-time ministry. And I had such a fright about, sharing. And because I didn't have the evidence, I had nothing to point to. And I also, because a lot of it is just like snippets of these, pieces that don't really have a chronological timeline for me to even go. And then this happened. Some of it is very easy, but some of it is very sketchy, which is why I'm getting some of your help. But I don't like to talk and share about things that I don't 100% have all the data and the science and whatever. And that's why I'm bringing people like you on to go like, okay, you talk and you tell people, like, and so thank you. But what are some of the things that you're experiencing? Because I watched your documentary and I cried through almost the whole thing. And I watched it a second time halfway through because you had your son on there and you guys traveled and he got to see, tell us a little bit about that documentary and like your family and what, response that you get from when you started making that shift. Because you've been doing this how many years now?
About 25.
Wow. So I bet 25 years ago, how was that 25 years ago compared to now? Because people are more open now.
Huge shifts in terms of how I'm received by, and I've done a lot of media, mainstream media and whatever, to the giggle factor, which stopped probably about 5 years ago because more and more people are being informed and what have you. But the whole idea of the documentary was that there was a producer that knew my son, because my son is a veterinary surgeon and he was on television for about a year in a vet's program. And the gentleman, the producer, also knew that I was into all the UFO side of it. And his concept was that it was more about the relationship of having two people with a different paradigm or a different belief system around what's going on this planet, and the dynamics that can, and the difficulties that can provide in a family. And that appealed to me as a therapist because I was seeing so many people come to me and say, my wife doesn't believe me, or, well, she sort of believes me, but really struggles and doesn't really want to hear any more about it because it makes her uncomfortable. When I start saying, well, last night they picked me up again, or they did this, this, and this, or I'm seeing X, Y, and Z. And because they're not experiencing it, they get overwhelmed by it. They're either fearful of it, or it's really hard for them to honor it in the way that the person hopes that they could. Or the family just thinks, oh, you're crazy. We always knew you were a bit weird or a bit different or whatever. So the whole idea was, the focus was the UFO in the sense of, do you believe these people that are coming to you and what have you? And for my son to actually talk to them, to have a chance to see for himself the authentic part of this, the way they're coming from their heart, that this was very tangible to them in many, many ways, for example. But also what it was showing him, the thing that he found that was confronting for him was when I did the debate in Canberra, because the gentleman there basically made fun of the whole phenomena and didn't treat it seriously, which I can tell you, metaphysically, steam was coming out of my head, but you don't see it, because I was so upset that he didn't treat it with any kind of respect, even though, he's entitled to his own opinion. But the bottom line was, my son was upset for me because it hurt him to see me being treated that way. And in a way I said, look, it's fine, because this is what the experiencer faces: the derision, the mockery, the dismissing of their experiences. So it was very important that it was shown. As far as I'm concerned, it shows how mainstream, in the most part, treats someone who has these experiences as though there's something wrong with them or whatever. So for me, that was extremely valuable. My son was very honoring. He brought in the scientist, but he also we had an agreement that doing this documentary wasn't going to shift our own relationship, and it didn't. I mean, we still were just as close, but I knew for him that this is where he wanted to be in his paradigm right now. He didn't want to go to that other place. And as you've said, Sharnael, very clearly, that what you knew some years ago, you've had to reappraise what you believe over. And I make a joke about the fact that I have been doing that continuously since I came into this, that I feel I'm standing on an ice floe that's my present paradigm, and it continually melts. So I have to jump and make a new one because that's no longer relevant anymore, because I've had to move to because as the information comes in, the understanding comes in, that no longer fits. So you've got to be continually adaptable to opening up what challenges you, particularly if it challenges you. Why does it challenge you? What is it about that is difficult for you to take on board when we don't know what we don't know? That's the beauty of this, our human journey, is that we're forever learning. What is reality? We don't even know what reality is. I have people when I take them into regressions, where they'll go interdimensionally, where they'll go to parallel universes, where they'll go to different timelines. And that's just the start. And who am I to say, oh, well, that can't be real, or that can't be real? What, Albert Einstein came up with a wonderful phrase where he said, those that think they have the mandate on truth and knowledge are shipwrecked by the laughter of the gods. And there you have it. No one knows. No one is any wiser than you are in terms of reality. We all have a unique perspective on reality, and it's minute compared to what is really what the quantum universe is. I mean, we can't even begin to, with our understanding at this point, know what reality is. So how is it that some come and say, well, I'm the expert in this, or I'm the expert in this? That's a worry. As soon as somebody thinks they know it all, that to me is a real concern, because they're going to realize there is so much they don't know. And for me, being with people that are exploring the multiverse and being taken to the multiverse are showing us more of our reality. And the interesting thing with our surveys that we did with the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Experience Research was, with the 4,200 people we surveyed with 600 questions, conscious recall, we discovered that only 25% is physical, that we actually go out to these craft physically. 75% we go out of body.
Wow.
So when you're saying, well, right, so where is the physical evidence? The physical evidence is in the shift in their awareness through their experiences. There is your evidence. The evidence is they become more multidimensionally aware. They also may start having downloads of physics, deep information about the cosmos, all that kind of stuff. They may find that they're having communication with these intelligences. They may find they're doing strange writing or scripts or symbols. They may find that they're doing different artwork that just comes through them. They may find that they're suddenly inspired to do music or to create new music or whatever. And some of the artists that I talk to, they tell me that what they're given, and some of them have never been into art at all, and all of a sudden they find themselves after an activation wanting to paint or wanting to draw, and they've never done it before in their lives. There is your evidence. Psycho-spiritual transformation. 85% of those surveyed had psycho-spiritual transformation after their encounters. There is your reality.
Wow. I never put that together before until you just said that. That's where my book came from. I got it in a download, literally, and wrote it in less than a day. And some of the chapters in there I got from dreams. When you mentioned the thing about equations and things like that, I literally woke up a few times and got this whole thing about timelines and equations, and I felt like a mad scientist, and that I had no previous knowledge of anything about, you know, echo waves and, you know, offering waves, and I just, but all of a sudden it was like, I knew it. And so I get, that makes sense to me, but I also was like, well, I mean, I guess source, God gave it to me. But yeah, I mean, if we're all connected and that is just a part of that connection, I can see where that would be considered the evidence. You also mentioned something about, you know, people making judgments and, you know, your family. And, you know, I think where I'm at, and I don't think I've always been there. I think I've actually been more rough and black and white in the past than I've ever been. But I do find myself very fluid with, you know, being more open, I guess less judgmental when people come up with their perception of what things are, where before it was very important to me for people to believe what I believed. It's like, no, this is the right thing, and like being right. And, you know, even trying to persuade people, no, really this, and be worried if they didn't think the way I did, like something could happen if they don't get this. And now I'm just like, oh, okay, you believe that? Awesome. You know, and, oh, you don't? Okay, great. You know, I do have a problem with, you know, if I post something on Facebook and then someone comes in just really mean or whatever, I'm not going to tolerate, you know, being ugly or unkind. I'm not mad at ignorance, and I'm not mad if they don't believe what I believe, because a lot of these people you know, they believe things that I believed a year ago. You know, so I'm like, yeah, I know why you believe that. I believed that once, you know, and that's cool. And have a good time on your journey. Like, we're all just like figuring it out with our little icing as it melts, you know. But, you know, yeah. What I have felt, it has been, I guess, an expansion for me, is just that ability to let everyone be where they're at and not be worried if they're not where I am, or worried if they don't believe me, or, you know, just kind of like, I don't know what happened, but something just happened where it was just like, this is my reality and this is what happened to me. And either you're going to love me for who I am as a person and we're still going to be friends, or you're not going to love me. I love you and I hope we can work it out. And also this happened to me. So, you know, I'm still working it out and in process, but, you know, my husband, who I, you know, am married to and I've known since 17, you know, when I started telling him about some of the negative side of some of these memories having to do with the military stuff, it was very disturbing, you know, being triggered with other events and specific locations that I went back to that I didn't know if I would ever go back to and even look forward to going to. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh God, like, no. And didn't want to say it even out loud because it's just so disturbing beyond. But one day I started telling him, and then, you know, he was like, why haven't you said this ever before? Like, you never said this. And I have had a little bit of a hard time explaining to people about the amnesia and then all of a sudden remembering. You know, I just talked to a PTSD lady the other day, and she works with a lot of people like you do too. And she was like talking about this amnesia effect and how like the veil starts thinning out and things can trigger. Can you speak a little bit? Because I'm sure I mean, aren't there people who are like 40, 50 and all of a sudden they just remember everything? And then other people can remember from the beginning. I mean, I have some memories of being little and telling my parents things. And then I also had things where they were like, no, or B was like, no, like I can't, you know. And then, you know, there's the military slaying and all the things that get you to block and not remember, you know. But what's your experience in that?
It can be all of that. For some, they have conscious memories right from when they're a small child, and they just realize that others don't see what they see, and they keep it quiet and they don't talk about it. I remember when I was in Norway at a conference, and this lady comes up to me, I'm talking about the star seeds, their awareness that they know they're not from here, that they've come in with gifts, they've got a sense of mission, they've always felt that their family was out there, even to what planetary system or whatever dimension. But I remember her saying to me, she was 79 years old, and said, everything you're mentioning about the star seeds, star kids, Mary, she said, I've experienced it all my life. And I used to call the sheep, I'm a farmer's wife, and I used to call the sheep in with my mind, and nobody knew how I did it. But you're the first person that has shown me what I am. And she was 79, nearly 80 years old. And that was a revelation. It was emotionally, extremely emotional for her. So, we've got these new upgrades of human that, that have been coming in for the last 100 years or more. But many of them, because of what goes on in society and mainstream thinking, have been very marginalized in terms of what they can do. Others will have bits of experience like yourself, but they will also say, well, I've had this dream, this recurring dream where I'm on a spacecraft, or I'm, seeing these beings and really weird dreams. And I usually say to them, do you remember the detail of that dream? And they'll say, yes, I've remembered it for 10 years. And I said, well, that's not a dream, because dreams disappear very quickly when you wake up. But if it's something real, because you're in a trance or you're out of body, it will appear like it's a dream. But it is craft, or going to others, or you're very likely out of body doing exactly that. So it's very, very important that people start to take notice of it. And as they do, then more information comes. And I say to them, your information about yourself comes in many ways. It comes in a resonance to information. It comes in a knowing, or it comes in a feeling, or it comes in a sensing, or it may even come in images. That's your multidimensional awareness giving you information about who you are. But are you listening? Or are you just dismissing it and saying, oh, that's fantasy, that's imagination, that's me wanting this or whatever? No. If you're resonating, or you have this knowing, it's that part of you, your super conscious, saying, this is who you are. Start listening to it. Because a lot of the time we're afraid to, because we're so afraid others will judge us or think we're crazy if we say, I've always had this feeling that I came from somewhere else. Why has that got to be not true? Why can't it be true? Because you've got the feeling, you've got the knowing, you've got the sensing. And that is when we really start to awaken, is when we take notice of that. You got the downloads, for example. I can tell you hundreds of people that have downloads from quantum physics, cosmology of various kinds, origin of the species, information about healing and healing techniques, how to bring in various energies, working with earth energies. All of that is what they're tapping into of our multidimensional awareness. And when we start realizing it has value, which it does, and they, often you've got healers that will start to listen, they're shown symbols, or they're shown energetically what they need to do, or they may be coming out with frequencies through star languages or light languages that activate DNA, for example, and people have profound healings. In the book, The New Human, I think it's chapter 19, I've got a beautiful story of Dr. Marie Batchelor, who was a medical doctor, GP, that had the standard 3D reality, married to a surgeon, who had this activation after she lost one of her children in India by galactic frequencies, came away from that, and now does activation through star language and her voice, and basically is activating DNA. She calls her a shamanic MD now. And that's what she does. From that experience that she had has completely changed her life. And now she's got the medical side, but she's also got the shamanic side. And she is using that to activate DNA and to actually remove programs, etc., etc. And, you know, what are you going to say about that? The difference is that she says to her patients, your head is not going to make any sense of this, but your heart will. You will feel it and you will know it. And she's had some amazing results from that. The results are the proof. The results are what we know is the reality. The fact that someone has changed from one awareness to a greater awareness in itself is telling you something profound has happened. That doesn't happen after imagination. It doesn't happen, you know, from a fantasy. The fact that someone has changed on whatever level in terms of their awareness is your reality. Just like all experiences change us. That is the reality.
Well, yeah, and I have to tell you too, I was introduced to a couple other documentaries, and it seems like the more, I don't want to say obsessed, but it's like the more I remember, the more another thing pops up that it's like, I don't know, compulsion is the word, but like, it's just like, oh, and I get this knowing you have to read this or you have to watch this. And like, it comes as I'm ready, I guess. And then more things pop up, or another person will show up that has had an experience or understanding or is a key for me. And I feel like it like opens up more, I don't know. It's almost like it's literally like a key to either a memory or a part of the biofield or an expansion. You talked about, getting these downloads of medical stuff or art or whatever. I mean, we know like Tesla and some of these brilliant people, Einstein, they were getting this information from other places. And, you know, this is all either from whatever contact that he had, and or as we know, and this is public with the military, that as ships came down and were found, they reverse engineered a lot of this technology, like the iPhone and ships and all these other things. You know, this is common knowledge. You could find this, William Tompkins and some of these other guys who have been, you know, talking about these things in the military for years and years and years, and gone to military meetings. And it's like, you know, okay, how long does it take before everyone catches on and we do have full disclosure here? You know, I love that Trump has come out and it has a space force, and it's not even a secret space force. You know, it's like a real talked about open space force, let alone, even though we've had a space force since before, you know, the 40s or whatever, when Eisenhower signed the contract for us to have that treaty where they can like use us and get our DNA and do whatever in exchange for technology. So, but, you know, going back to the documentaries, a couple of them came up that I wanted to bring up to you. You've probably seen them too, but, you know, I had one person who said, well, this person has all these documentaries or watched all these documentaries, has all these books, and they were just trying to harvest information so they could have content to talk about their experience. And I was like, or they were having all the experiences and started getting these books because they were trying to make sense of what they were doing. It goes both ways. You know, you can't just, you know, it can't be one way or the other. And I know that for me, I never had books on UFOs or anything. I mean, I've always been interested in angels, but now it's just like, oh my gosh, you know, this other person feels they got to give me this. And I look at it. I mean, I found out about you from a friend that was just randomly like, you should read this. I think this is important for you. And I was just like, oh, okay. And I look at it, and it's called The New Human. I had no, you know, at that time, didn't have a whole lot of whatever, but two other documentaries. One had to do with extraordinary seeding. And another one, and I think Barbara Lamb had some things to do with that. And I saw in the beginning of your book, you made mention to Barbara, who's passed, whatever that means. And then another one was about patient 17, who was a Christian man who was brought in with Dr. Lear. And Dr. Lear found a piece of something in his leg that was like an implant, and how he's done multiple testing on multiple patients and found these transmitters that have been implanted. You know, back in 2009, I was actually in Wyoming with another minister teaching, and this woman came to me and she said, I need help. I need to know what to do because I am a pastor here and I have 40 women to date. This is 2009. I have 40 women to date right now that all have said that they have been impregnated by aliens and that then the babies are taken, or, you know, there's no sign of the baby. And, you know, 40 women and some of them multiple pregnancies each. And she's coming to me at the time, you know, I wasn't there you're asking me, I don't know how to tell you to, you know, she wanted me even to meet with these people. And I didn't have the vibrational match at that time to even go like, oh yeah, that sounds real. You know, at the time I was just like, that sounds heavy duty, and I'm so sorry for those people, and I have no way to counsel anyone except for I will just pray for you, you know. And but now looking back and watching this movie and watching some of these other things, I'm like, gosh, you know, that could have been a different opportunity if I was where I am now, you know. But I'm sure you've had people who've experienced things like that with this New Human book. And also, what about the implant situation? Have you heard, you know, what is your experience with either of these two topics?
Well, they're big topics in themselves. But first of all, Barbara Lamb is still alive and she's still working, even though she's in her middle 80s. Amazing lady, a beautiful friend and colleague. So she's worked in this field too, worked with the hybrids. But if you want to know about the implants in the Awakening book, I do a whole chapter on implants.
Good.
And
Good.
I also connected with Dr. Roger Lear, who was the one that took out many different types of implants. Some of them were biological, some of them were metallic, with highly magnetized. Some of them seem to have a very positive impact on people, where when they had them taken out, they actually had been well up to that point, and when they were taken out, that actually they started to become ill. So it seemed like with some of the implants, they actually enhanced their immune system. Some of those that had implants told me that helped them download information from the beings, also helped to keep a connection. So not all of them are negative, and that is really important. Some of them have come from the military, and those have a more sinister result. So when I work with someone with implants, also not all of them are physical. Some of them are energetic implants. And so that you've got a different protocol for energetic ones as well. So it's about accessing the subconscious, superconscious to find out exactly what that implant is there for and what's its purpose. And then you know which way you need to go with it or whatever. So there's a lot more with the implant side than people realize. There's also in Awakening a whole chapter on missing pregnancies. And that was a particularly powerful one, because I have met hundreds of women that have had what they feel was a pregnancy that was taken after a month, 6 weeks, month, or 2 months, 2.5 months. 1 minute they felt pregnant, the next minute there was no pregnancy, and this sense of grief that they've lost something, that they've lost, and that yet they've got no way of proving it or whatever. I remember one lady had as many, I think, as 20 pregnancies, and she was taken up on board craft, and she was invited to interact with them, because they are often a mix of human and ET. And they do need, the human side needs mother's love. I even met one woman in England who told me her job on board craft was to help the human mothers connect with their hybrid children as well. So there's another whole big side of that to do with hybrids, human hybrids that are on Earth and the ones that are on board craft. And recently I talk about a Brazilian former air hostess that saw in a hotel corridor this little girl that about 11, and she was part human, part feline, part a cat being. And as soon as she saw that, she got really scared. And this is the human, Amanda, got really scared and ran away. Later, when she was on board craft, she saw this little girl, a little older, with a cat, the feline human side, and realized it was her hybrid daughter.
Oh my
but
God.
That's not all the end of the story. The story was that when she was on board craft one time, her human daughter, who was 6, she saw playing with her hybrid sister on board craft. She actually saw them interacting.
Wow.
So there's a whole new level of what's going on the craft, creating new species. And only recently I spoke to one lady who'd been shown by the mantis, who are master geneticists. She was shown that they do this on planets and seed planets all through the universe, the cosmos. They are master geneticists, and they do this with all sorts of different species. And I had that confirmed by an 8-year-old girl that was excited to tell me that when she goes on out of body with her special friends, that she's taken to a planet where she was shown how to levitate, how to use her psychic abilities, but also shown genetic engineering, where they were showing her how they alter genetics with different species and mix them for different seeding other planets on this universe and others. So this is a real constant theme, that the genetic engineering is going on, not and has been, not just here, and is still continuing as we get activated, but all over the cosmos. This is a huge, huge picture that we're only just beginning to understand.
Wow. I don't even know what to say to that. Going back to the transmitter thing with Dr. Lear, I know that some of them that they took out had pieces of, metals that aren't found on the planet.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
And when they were taking some of these transmitters out, let's say if it was a piece of a nail, because this guy was like, I just hope, in his mind, he wanted it to be like maybe something jammed in his leg when he was playing baseball and it just got lodged in there. He was like, for my sake, I just hope that it's nothing more than that. He didn't want it to be weird. And people kept saying, well, what if it is weird? And he was just like, I'm just not going to go there until I have something to go. And I think they pulled it out. And if my memory is correct, I want to say that there were 39 or 59 different type of metals in that one little splice that was in his leg. And that 90% of them were not ever found on this planet before. And they said if you had like a piece of metal that just got in your leg from a sports injury or, whatever, being a boy outside, that usually you might have 1 or 2 metals like that make a nail or a piece of something. But to have, 40, 50 different things in a little tiny deal, and most of them have never been, found on this planet or to any knowledge anywhere, to be in this little thing was an interesting thing. But I had not heard about them being something beneficial. We know in this area of what they're talking about with vaccinations or implants or chips, that's been something that's been brought to the surface and we talked about more fluidly now, tracking people, tracing people, that kind of thing. So I guess that was my mindset of just like, oh, well, this has got to be bad. But going back to the children thing, holy moly, like felines and seeing children and that brings it a whole new level. I know on your documentary you had a man who a woman had come to him and had some things happening, and your son Chris was like, off camera after meeting these guys going, he seems like so nice and so average and just so humble and just a matter of fact, like average Joe guy. And then he's talking about this woman who took advantage of him. And he was like, I think in this case, I might be mixing it up, like almost like paralyzed while they were doing whatever they were doing to get what they needed to procreate. And I watched something called Love and Saucers. I'm still watching it, where he's talking about multiple babies, by this one being that came, and he went up and saw a room of his own children, and he, that's just like, what, why? So is this to make a plan B for, if in case something happens here, they're having these other places to have, you said master geneticists. Does any of these kids or whoever say why they're doing any of this, or what they're just trying to find a superhuman or a super being, or trying to just procreate or find the perfect mix, or what's the
big agendas? I think the ones that are on the craft are not meant to come to planet Earth. They're there for a reason. They're not meant to be brought here. They're to go to other places or have different roles with the beings, because that's where they are growing and educated and whatever. We are hybrids, okay? But there are upgrade hybrids that are on this planet now. And one of them I talk about is she was 16 when I first talked to her, Marina, in Spain. And she was explaining she woke up to her hybrid nature when she was, I think, 14 or 15, when she suddenly became aware of her connection to the beings, etc., etc. And she said that she became aware that her mother was taken just at the moment of conception, and they added more extraterrestrial genetics to her. And she's a mix of various star beings as well as human. And there are a lot of the children that are aware they're hybrids. Just like the little 8-year-old explained, he's got part mantis in him and part lion, like feline. But the mantis is the one that he's most connected to. And when he dies, he said he's going back to his ancestor mantis. So they feel very connected to the star family that are visiting them out of, maybe out of body, or they're going out of body. And they recognize the hybrid side of them. But I believe we're all hybrids, because we have these genetic inserts that came from these beings right at the beginning when Homo sapiens sapiens was created. There is evidence from a number of those that have had experiences that were told at least 12 different species have added their DNA to our DNA. And one of them is a very well-known ufologist who's passed on a few years ago, Sergeant Robert Dean, who was in the military, found out in the 60s that the military knew of at least 4 different types of species visiting this planet, and it blew his mind. It was only later, many years later, before he died, a few years before he died, he told publicly that he had had experiences and that he'd recently been taken up on board craft for a number of weeks and was shown that we came from at least 12 different species of extraterrestrial. And he said, and I've been shown the future, and the future is amazing once we get over this whole shift in awareness and when we actually realize our true nature and how our consciousness shifts into that expanded reality. So they're just 2 that come up with the 12 different inserts of DNA. There may be more, but what we do know is that as people start to be activated with their DNA, their dormant DNA, they'll start to say, oh, I feel I'm from the Pleiades, or I feel I'm from Arcturus, or I feel I'm... Why do you think they suddenly feel that? Is because part of them is connecting to their star origins, and then they will find themselves having information about that particular star system, about their part in it, because as a soul, we've been all of these star visitors. As a soul, we've been intelligences, we've been different forms, we've been as a soul in other universes, other dimensions, that this is just one of many different forms we have been in our history, our soul history. So, I say, so as one 8-year-old said, Sharnael, she said, "Mom, we are the aliens."
Yeah, well, even scripture says that we're not from this world. You know, it's like even the Bible says we're aliens. It literally says that. So, you know, it's a different connotation than my programming from before. But I know we got to wrap up. And you talked about Robert Dean seeing the future and it being really awesome once we all got, you know, into that place. There's a lot of conspiracy theories. There's a lot of doom and gloom. And then there's also, you know, I have been saying to people, this is the most exciting time ever for us to be alive because there is so much activation and that this is our chance to stand up and this is our chance to awaken and this is our chance. I mean, even your book is called The Awakening, The New Human, and that this is our chance to actually figure out what we're thinking about, figure out what, you know, be aware of what we're aware of, go beyond the limits if we have the courage to do so, awaken ourselves, awaken others, speak our truth, voice our truth, have courage, and that we were born for right now. This is the time that we have been here and put on the planet for now. This is not a time to be scared or back down or, you know, be frightened or cower back. This is a time where we have to actually remember who we are and stand up and say, you know, no, we're not going to consent to this, and this, and we're not going to follow whatever and AI this and blah, blah, you know, all these agendas that go against humanity, that go against Earth and the health of the Earth and animals and nature and all the things. But what would you say as far, you mentioned the activations, what can we do to not only activate fully and the best possibilities and probabilities of who we are, whatever that looks like, and also stay in the mindset of hope for right now, you know, in this awakening, like what, you know, just final, you know, as we wrap up here, what do you say to those who are scared and freaked out and like, this is really new and whatever?
I would say that we've all as souls chosen to be here because we know we can make a difference. The fact that these children are coming in with this incredible awareness that I talk about, you know, small children saying, we've come to help teach you to change what's going on this planet, to make it what it should be, to create a new world, a new earth. The fact that they've chosen to come in means that it will happen because they wouldn't bother otherwise, would they? Logically, what would be the point of coming if they know it's not going to work? Of course they know it's going to work. So they're coming in because they know it's going to work. And we've come for the same reason. Otherwise, we wouldn't bother I certainly wouldn't bother to incarnate. If they said, Mary, you're going to work really hard all your life, but it's going to be a waste of time, I would say, well, go and find some other idiot to do it, because I'm sure not going to do that, because I know me. So what I'm saying is they're come in and we've come in with this awareness and this awakening to make this a new reality, a new future for humanity. And the reason it is exciting is that we have to at first clear the decks. We have to make our way through, you know, what some call the dark night of the soul. Don't be fooled by the fear agendas and the propaganda, because you know in your heart that you are greater than that you are greater than anything on this planet. And some people have said to me, I know I've got something amazing inside me. And when one 9-year-old from Sweden said to me, Mary, human beings are incredibly credible. They're amazing. But they've got to believe it first. So what we've got to do is believe in ourselves and believe in our abilities and who we are. And if you want to wake up and activate, all you've got to do is want to do it. It's all about intent. That's the frequency. When you have that intent, your soul is not going to let you miss the bus because it's worked too hard to get you here. So chill.
That's awesome.
And trust yourself.
That's awesome. I love that. And I love you. You're so awesome. I just love your spirit, your humility, your heart. Every word that you've spoken has just been so brilliant and beautiful and heartfelt. So thank you. And please let us know. Give us all the ways we can connect with you. I mean, obviously, your website, you have social media. Give us all your ways that we connect, your resources, your documentary. I am going to give links with this video and I'm going to list it, but I want you to, you know, in case I'm missing something, please let us know how we can find you.
Well, you only have to Google Mary Rodwell. The links come up, the alien lady, ACERN, any of those will find me, including, as you say, the documentaries. I'm on Facebook as well. So it's not hard. Just don't make it Mary Roswell, because I've been called Mary Roswell a few times. And those within ufology will know why that is. I'm going to be speaking at Contact in the Desert next year in June, but I'm also going to be part of an Ancient Aliens cruise in March as well, where I'm going to be speaking. But the bottom line is for people is, you know, I've got lots of presentations on YouTube with Gaia TV and others. There's lots of information there, and I am more than happy to hear from you if there's anything that you would like to ask me or understand.
Awesome. Well, you are an amazing woman. All your work is amazing. I know you're helping so many people, not just individually, one by one, but on the masses with these teachings and these conferences and these books. I am making a commitment. I'm going to get through. I read very, very quickly. That's one of my gifts. And I will probably be finished with these in the next couple of days, just because if it's actually interesting to me, then it's easier to even get through. And now that I've met you, oh my gosh. So thank you for your wealth of information and your time. I know how busy you are. And we will connect soon. Thank you so much. Thank you guys, everybody. Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.